Coming up next on America's Hope, one pastor in East Palestine, Ohio, is not forgetting the people, but leaguered by the toxicity in the air. See how he's bringing clean air to the people living there. And then we focus on one man with Urban Ministries Incorporated. See what they're doing to change the landscape of education in America. All that and more next on America's Hope. Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. And wherever you are, we do hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family, because you matter. We say that every night because we sincerely mean it. You matter, and you're part of the hope that makes America shine brighter every single day through every circumstance we go through. For example, in East Palestine, Ohio, people are still enduring a very difficult time. They're still persevering in the wake of that train derailment that took place earlier this year, resulting in the fact that they have a lot of toxic air quality. The air quality is not good. And so people are learning how to deal with that and overcome that. That's where we start tonight's program. Let's get right to it. And we're joined now by Pastor Bob Helbeck. He's working in East Palestine, Ohio, working with a particular group called helpeastpalestineohio.org. And they've created a fundraising campaign to provide medical-grade air purifiers to 2,500 homes and businesses in and around the disaster area, where many of you will recall that train derailment on February 3rd, spilling more than 1 million pounds of hazardous chemicals that were ignited by authorities. And for several days, if you go back and look at what happened at that particular point in time, residents were confronted with a toxic plume which blackened the skies of East Palestine and neighboring towns, contaminating the air, the soil, and water. And it continues at this very hour to sicken many residents today. Pastor Bob, thank you for joining us this hour. And you've been actively involved in caring for the people there in your community. Talk to me about the air purification systems that you've been able to develop and how that is helping the residents there still living with this unfortunate circumstance.
Okay. Well, this particular air purifier is a whole house purifier, so it will do 2,000 square feet. We were looking for purifiers, and we've received donations from a number of different companies, but this particular one takes care of VOCs. That's what our people are concerned about, the vinyl chloride, whatever came out of the smoke. And so we particularly like this one because of that. It does a lot of other things too. It takes care of COVID, which we like that. So it's an air purifier to take care of the whole house. People are just still anxious about the air and the water. Those two things, I've talked to people who still have allergies, their kids still get nosebleeds, and they're just not sure about their health. So what we're trying to do is something, we've given away water, and the air purifiers just seem to calm people down and help them. This company gave 160 of these purifiers to the school system, so young parents feel comfortable now because their kids are going to school, they have these air purifiers. We're trying to get them into the homes also to help the people.
You know, that brings a lot of hope to people who are dealing with the anxiety and stress of having this disaster take place in their area, and seeing the federal government respond and other people respond, albeit that the cameras have gone now, the media has gone now. You're still there working with people through the First Church of Christ in East Palestine and serving the community as a hub for disaster relief, and you've partnered, as you said, with Germ Solutions USA. I forgot to mention that these air purification systems that you've given out so far have actually been given away free. And so what are people telling you, or how are they responding to you when they're receiving these whole house air purification systems from you for free?
Well, of course, they're very thankful. Many of them could not afford to get them. Some of them have small units that might work in one room, but this does something that makes them feel safe. And and we hope that helps them stay in town. We've had a number of people, of course, move from town. From our church alone, we've had 4 families move. We have 3 other families are renting out of town right now, and they hope to come back sometime this year. So we hope this makes people feel comfortable. They'll come back, kids will feel safe, they'll feel safe, at least safer.
And how would you describe the atmosphere or the psyche, if you will, of the people living there right now? I know you're giving help through the air purification systems. Obviously, you're giving help through counseling and just trying to console people who are still reeling from this disastrous train derailment that took place. And the train company that provided, that says it's providing help, are they really doing their due diligence to make sure that all the people there are being helped?
Well, of course, it would depend who you talk to about that, but the railroad's doing quite a bit. They have helped us financially with some of the air purifiers that we gave out. So it depends who you talk to as far as how they feel the railroad is doing. They still have a lot of work to do. They're still cleaning up. That won't be done till sometime next year. We still have a main road coming into town that's closed. That hurts business. Some of our businesses are down 50%. So we're not back to normal yet, but we're going on with our daily lives, and people are doing okay, but they're still scared. They don't know what's going to happen 10 years, 15 years down the road, especially with their kids.
Wow, when you talk about that, let's unpack that a little bit. You say people have gone back to their daily routine of living, albeit the routine is disrupted. And then you're saying looking long term down the road, 10, 15 years. Are people expressing some concern about what type of medical ailments they may have developed from this toxic plume that engulfed your community for so many days?
Yes, a lot of them are still expressing that concern about what happened then. And still, there are people who tell me they can smell things in the air yet. I don't notice it, but everyone's a little different when it comes to that. And when we think back to what happened in New York and the towers and people years after that who got cancer and problems. So I think that's on people's minds.
So, Pastor, how do you give people hope through this kind of desperate times that they're still experiencing?
Well, of course, we do what we can to help. We share the message of Jesus Christ, which brings the most hope. And then we do what we can to comfort them. We listen to them. We send them to places where we think they can get help. We help how we can. We've done numerous things to try to help people, and we'll continue to do that. We're not the only ones in town. There are other groups that are also helping, but we do what we can.
And that's all good. I mean, all the things that you're doing, all of the above, mentally, spiritually, physically, you're trying to do all of that. From what we've reported on, last March, you'll recall a team of 15 doctors and epidemiologists with the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry began surveying residents, but had to withdraw on the first day after 7 of its members developed suspicious symptoms, according to reports. Have there been follow-ups since March from those doctors coming into the community and now better prepared to deal with some of the things that have gone on because of what's been circulating throughout the atmosphere?
I haven't heard about that group that came in. There are different universities that have come in and done some studies. We had a call last week about somebody who wants to come in, but I don't know about that. Some of the information that we've received from different groups conflicting with the EPA. So people aren't sure what to believe.
Yeah, so you're still getting conflicting reports, but the bottom line is, what do you want America to know about the good folk who live in East Palestine, Ohio? And you'll recall that some of them felt slighted by the Biden administration because the president did not visit them at a time of their greatest need. Are they still smarting from that, or have they been able to get through that? Because life goes on, and you still have to deal with how do you raise your family, and how do you deal with a community that's been actually devastated by the impact of this train derailment?
Yeah, I heard the mayor the other day say he would welcome the president to come. He hasn't been here yet. I think that concerns some citizens. The EPA has been here from the beginning. We've had a number of congressmen, senators, and people like that. The governor has been great about being here and doing what he can, meeting with community leaders and others. So we've had a lot of outside help. We've had people from about almost every state call. We've had water brought to us from Florida and Georgia and New York, all over. People have really been gracious and helpful. So, but as
Yeah.
far as what most government does, it's who knows.
The fundraising that you've created, this campaign, how can people provide more funding to you, knowing that the donations will go to provide more medical grade air purifiers to more residents living there?
Yes, or you go to that site to make the donation. I believe the site also has some information about the purifiers if they want to find out more. And anything that they can give would be helpful. We would love to be able to give out another 1,000, another 2,000 air purifiers. Our people around here are nervous, and hopefully that will help with their nerves, but also help purify the air for them.
Before we go, Pastor, give me a story from perhaps one of your parishioners or one of the people that you've met since this situation developed last February. Give me a story that they've given you about hope as a result of something that you might have done or said during a Sunday morning sermon.
Well, that's a tough one. You have a lot of different people you talk to. A specific one comes to mind. Hard to bring one to mind. When it comes to the air purifiers, we've had a number of people who have come in and just thanked us for them. We've tried to encourage people through the sermon. The sermon I preached right after this happened reminded people that God hasn't promised to keep us from having problems, but He'll be with us as we go through these problems. So just one particular one coming to mind, that's kind of difficult.
Yeah. Thank you. He's Pastor Bob Helbeck, and he, of course, is helping. So if you can help America, go ahead and send a donation. We'll be back with more after this. And welcome to America's Hope. I'm joined now by someone who's been on our program before. He's a friend and someone that I really have so much admiration and respect for, Jeffrey Wright. He's the CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated, based and headquartered in Chicago. He's also co-author of the book, Nonprofit Leadership in a For-Profit World. Jeff, thank you for joining us once again on America's Hope. With all that you do, I'd like to start in the place of Urban Ministries Incorporated and the great work you do as the largest African-American owned faith-based ministry in terms of supplying scholastic and Christian literature for so many African-American churches throughout this country. Why is your company so important for such a time as this?
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me. Urban Ministries Incorporated was founded in 1970 by Dr. Melvin Banks, who had gone to Chicago from Birmingham, Alabama, thinking that he would come back and do a Bible school in Alabama. And his inspiration was a verse that an old man quoted to him when he was 12 years old after giving his testimony. And he said the gentleman came up to him, looked him in his eyes, and said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Hosea 4:6. And of course, this is true to this day. People are destroyed for lack of knowledge of God's word. And God's word is so important and so needed today in the African American community, but in the entire global community. So his idea was to make certain that the resources that were available for parents, for churches, for pastors, for teaching would be contextual and reflect the lived experience of African American people. And in 1970, beginning UMI with teen resources and doing a seminar called Winning and Keeping Teens in Church, he especially wanted to make sure that our teenagers could see themselves in the literature, that they could see a Jesus from the Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Sweden, who they would recognize and identify with. And the idea was that the Word of God could become living and vibrant in their lives.
Jeff, I like that. The Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Sweden. I catch your drift very, very directly. I do want to ask you, you talked about actually educating teenagers about who they are and their identity in terms of faith. Right now, many Americans are going through an identity crisis, as you know. Black children, white children, Asian children, Hispanic children, Native American children, they're all going through identity crisis. And yet, the older generation could be doing a lot more in terms of the interconnectivity that we can have with each other to help our younger generation aspire to greatness. Instead, some members of Generation Z are saying, I've all but given up. And we have suicide rates continuing, or suicide ideation. We have opioid addictions and fentanyl crisis. How do you address that from your perspective as a leader who's putting scholastic material out there to help people understand their faith and how they apply their faith in everyday living?
This is a really, really important challenge and question for us today. For over 50 years, we have been creating resources for children, youth, adults, and even for pastors and clergy to help them with faith formation in these incredibly difficult times. Right now, there's what I would describe as a crisis in catechism, the spiritual formation of youth. Many churches have decided that they are not going to be as engaged and involved in shaping the spiritual lives of youth. Sunday schools are in decline across the country, not as much within the African American community as in the general market. But the broad fact of the matter is that the COVID crisis forced churches in many instances into streaming only. And then as we begin to rejoin, people have not been as active in reaching young children and youth and adults in our churches. It's a real problem. Vacation Bible schools, a thing almost of the past. Children's church, youth ministry, Sunday school. There's a gap. And this gap has been possible despite what looks like a thriving church because so many people are streaming. And that is a thin and light Christianity. I'm not dismissing the power of the stream. Streaming and video-based ministry and media-based ministry is super important. But the life-on-life spiritual formation, when adults are in the lives of children shaping their character, is critical and it's missing. We are developing newer resources for parents and for digital delivery to help address this, but all of us need to be concerned about the spiritual formation of children given the crises that you mentioned.
So, Jeff, if I hear you correctly, then you're talking a lot about high tech, and yet, while it's good to have high tech, we still need fundamentally high touch. People talking to people and not being isolated in our echo chambers or silos along political lines and racial lines and faith lines. We all have to find a way of coming together to heal the troubled soul of America. In doing that, this show is called America's Hope. How do you bridge those divides to bring hope to our youth, to our older Americans, to our Black Americans, our white Americans, our Asian Americans, all of our family in America?
You know, our nation is rooted in that great hope, and it's a spiritually grounded hope, a new life, a kingdom life that concerns others as much as oneself, where we live lives that are sacrificial, loving, caring, and exemplifying the character traits that are laid out in Scripture, in God's Word. Now, the challenge, and this is a big challenge to parents today, is to assume responsibility for the spiritual formation of your children. You can't delegate this to the church. You certainly can't delegate it to many of our schools. So we have to engage first by making certain that we're living what we're teaching and preaching. And right now, we have a lot of adults behaving badly, not living from a place of love and justice and gentleness and faithfulness and concern for the others, but really locked into very, very divisive and very self-centered kinds of behaviors and character traits that, don't make any of us look good. Well,
Jeff,
if you're not living it, Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I cut you off. If you're not living it, what?
If you're not living it, you're not teaching it, is what I was about to say. It's not enough just to have the words. You've got to live them out. If you're
Wow.
living something different than you're teaching something else. And that's just where we are so critically today as a nation.
You know, the first time that we talked, Jeff, you were on the show talking about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all that he really stood for from his Christian faith, but how he shared that faith with all faiths and all people. And the world, his dream caught fire with the world. People began to believe in the dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed with certain unalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, you've traveled the world, I've traveled the world. I have found that dream, coined the American dream, to be universal. And so America's hope is also universal, that we can lift everybody up. But Jeff, as I look at the political landscape right now, getting into the 2024 presidential campaign, and you just alluded to it, you talked about adults behaving badly. What would be your advice to political candidates who aspire for higher office?
This is so, so important. My first piece of advice is recognize that young people are the future and they are watching you. And the vast percentages of the undecided, who everyone is vying for their attention right now, are younger voters, younger folks who are trying to make sense out of the chaos, really, that our politics seem to have become. My advice is operate from a place of biblical and moral character. You are being watched. You're being listened to. And if what you're saying is rooted in hate, bigotry, the despising of anyone who is less than, you're not only operating outside of universal human rights and principles that built this nation, but you're certainly operating against your own best interest because now more than ever, people see you and they are looking and watching and listening to what is going on and what you stand for. And they're not going to follow. And this doesn't matter whether it's red, blue, or purple. People want authentic, lived truth. This is what God has wired into all of us. And when we don't see it, and when we see put down behavior, it is not going to be good for you.
Yeah, you know, Jeff, Urban Ministries is headquartered there in Chicago, and I know you guys are throughout the nation. And yet, you see from your vantage point what's happening to young America, the multiple mass shootings, the racially motivated shootings. Your concerns about that, and how do you address that?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about it. Many have said that we are in a place that the nation of Germany was in the 20s and the 30s when people became so politically, I don't even know how to describe it, but marginalizing their faith for their politics and determining that their greatest love was nation over God, morals, and country. You know, I like to think that we're not going to head down the path, of course, that Germany went down, that people of goodwill, people of faith, people who believe that their faith should trump their politics, people who understand that their identity should be rooted less in ethnicity and more in spirituality. But if we become uh, politically centered, ethnically centered, or we're being kingdom centered, it's not going to be a good time for America, and we're seeing that already. And of course, uh, violence, which no society can survive based on the kind of violence that we're starting to experience right now, whether it's violence inflicted on self with suicides at all-time highs or mass shootings also at all-time highs. This is a time of reckoning for all of us. And for people of faith, for people who believe that there is, in fact, a God who has limits and will set them, This is a time for sure when we all need to examine ourselves and make certain that the principles that we're living for are the principles that Dr. King exhibited and that are principles that are operating from the place of love, of justice, of hope, and perseverance, all things that Dr. King preached and taught as his life, his very young life, came to a close.
Jeff, we got to end it there, but man, I love what you've had to say. I do have one final quick question before we go. What's your hope for America?
Sure. That's a great question. Um, I want to be hopeful. And I think that God has allowed an amazing nation to come into being. We've got just about every people group, every nation, every ethnicity sampled into the US population. None more than 3 or 4%. I'm not talking about races, I'm talking about ethnicities. And I'm hopeful that we can come together as Americans, but rooted in our shared humanity and the fact that we represent the whole world. I mean, we're all here, and do something that at least addresses the 6 things that were on Jesus's final exam list in Matthew 25:35. And that is food, water, clothing, shelter, healthcare, justice, and the stranger. Those are the things that we were challenged by Christ to do for the least of these. And that is the sheep versus the goat dividing line. Have we done the things that we can do to solve very solvable problems in those very basic areas of human need? I hope America is the nation that does it.
I'm hoping right along with you, Jeff. Jeffrey Wright, CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated and co-author of the book Nonprofit Leadership in a For-Profit World. Thank you for bringing us some profitable messaging about hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm joined now by Anton Kresick, and he has founded an unusual way of letting people know that he is very much pro-life, and he's trying to help pregnancy centers throughout the United States so that women can keep their babies and go through the difficult period of pregnancy in this difficult time, I should say, because of the fight between pro-life and pro-choice groups. But what he's done, he's created a coffee brand called 7 Weeks Coffee. And he's here to talk to us about his choice in making a pro-life statement through coffee. Good of you to join us tonight, Anton. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Talk to me about 7 Weeks Coffee and how you came up with the idea of producing this unique brand of coffee.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. It really just started 2 years ago with the simple idea. What if we could sell just world-class specialty coffee and donate 10% of every sale to pregnancy care centers? So kind of like the idea of leading with our tithe. And so that's what we set out to do. In our first month, we sold $8,000 worth of coffee and dropped off a check for $800 and just thought it was the coolest thing. So fast forward to today, we're almost 2 years in, and we've been able to raise over $150,000 now, supporting a network of over 500 pregnancy care centers across the nation. So we're just staying true to our mission, but we're selling coffee and trying to save lives.
You know, it's really important what you're doing in terms of saving lives and staying true to your mission and helping pregnancy centers throughout the country. What for people who don't really realize what a pregnancy crisis center does, perhaps you could explain to them how valuable they've been to young girls who have chosen to keep their babies.
Yeah, I love to talk about them. They are the hands and feet of the pro-life movement, put it simply. They are on the front lines saving and rescuing women and children in communities across America. They are the resources where women who are facing an unplanned pregnancy turn to. They provide all free services, from free ultrasounds to prenatal care to baby clothing to parenting classes. They help rescue women out of very difficult situations or abuse. They are giving back every step of the way, and so we want to be a support to them. So that's what our mission is, to financially support them by donating 10% of every sale. And we just think they're the most worthy cause to support. So that's why we want to talk about them, uplift them, and financially support them.
You know, it's important what you just talked about, because you want to uplift them as they're trying to uplift young girls who are torn between the decision, should I keep the child or should I abort the child? And these pregnancy crisis centers, they intervene by advising the young lady to stay the course, keep the child, or at least take the baby through full term and delivery, and then provide the child a chance of having parents that will love that infant as adoptive parents. It's such a campaign, a remarkable program that these pregnancy crisis centers do. When you developed the name 7 Weeks, what was the impetus behind calling it 7 Weeks Coffee?
Yeah, so it was a funny story. When I had the idea for a pro-life coffee company, I called my wife, who was a nurse, and I told her the idea, and she asked the question that inspired it all, which is, when is a baby the size of a coffee bean? I look it up. At 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean. At the same time, though, a heartbeat is detected on ultrasound, and we support pregnancy care centers, and one of their primary things they provide is free ultrasound services. So that's how we came up with the name 7 Weeks Coffee, to tie in the cause, and that's why the heartbeat's in our logo as well.
Yeah, that's really nice. And that ultrasound, when people hear that ultrasound, they hear that baby's heartbeat, they realize how valuable and precious the life within the womb is. And it actually alters and changes the course for many women who choose to move forward with the pregnancy to delivery. And these pregnancy crisis centers are right there on the front lines, helping many of them. Now, I understand that Billy Graham also inspired you based on one of his famous quotes about the fact that he believed the next move of God would be believers making a difference in the marketplace. Explain to me how that translated to what you're doing with 7 Weeks Coffee.
Yeah, I've always been such a big fan of Billy Graham and his work in the ministry he has, set forth for generations. And that quote really stuck with me, this idea that as Christians, we can take, our faith outside of the church and into everyday life and into the marketplace, where consumers can shop values from companies they believe in. And for us, when we got started, there was no such thing as a pro-life coffee company. So we wanted to fill that void where people could, who really care about the pro-life issue, to have an impact with every purchase. And so that's what it means to me, is to live out our Christian values in our business as a pro-life business, and share that and make a difference. And I think that's what we're seeing in today's culture, is that a lot of people have felt alienated by brands and consumer products that, actively work against their values. And so we want to stand against that, be a product that's unapologetically pro-life, and take our values into the marketplace.
And in your unapologetically pro-life stance, have you received any flack or criticisms from the pro-choice movement?
Sure, when you're kind of over the target, you're going to take some flack, but that's a good thing. I mean, there's always, messages that come in that are nasty and stuff, but we don't let it deter us. We stay strong to what we believe. We know we're fighting for, the right cause on this debate, that when we look back on historically, I think it will be look back on something like slavery, something that we horror that was a part of our culture. And I think that's what abortion would be. And we want to be a part of the solution here, and supporting the resources that help make abortion unthinkable, which are pregnancy care centers.
Let me ask you a question. You're only 20-something. You started this at the age of 22, 3 years ago. So you're part of that Generation Z. Talk to me about Generation Z and what their concerns about America have been.
Yeah, I think you're seeing there's definitely been a little bit of a wake-up call within our generation. I think it's been great to meet other pro-lifers, of my age, people that are starting to think more about these issues. I think we kind of throw off the next generation as, either too far left or secular and things like that. But it's been great to meet and work with some organizations like Students for Life. They've done a great job of working and partnering with the youth in the pro-life movement. But yeah, we want to be a voice that for the next generation, where we can be bold on these values. I think you see it in the opposite, essentially, where there's a lot of outspokenness against, for the pro-choice values or things of that nature. But there's a silent majority, and there's definitely the same remnant within our generation, which is a good thing.
Anton, you talk about being involved in the political process, but is it more of a life process for you, where you're just so concerned? I mean, you and your wife is a nurse, and of course you have now developed this coffee brand that is promoting pro-life and helping pregnancy centers throughout the country. So is it more for you a spiritual calling, a call upon your life, other than getting away from the political aspects of it, but getting just down to the nuts and bolts of what you feel led to do because of your faith?
Yeah, no, it definitely has. We are a ministry, disguised as a business where we think of ourselves as a ministry first. We obviously are a business that we want to sell a product. We want to produce, a product that helps, helps the farmers from where we buy the coffee from and helps our employees in a living. But we are a ministry first, and I think we want to keep that focus. I think when you do that, it takes and enlarges the perspective here of that, every time we sell coffee, we're directly giving back to a center in need. And if we want to keep that in front of us all the time as the reason why we want to grow our company and run everything through that filter of how we can serve and how we can help pregnancy care centers. And I think that's what's led to, kind of our growth over the last 2 years and people joining our movement from all over the country. They see that this is a ministry first. And I think hopefully a lot of other brands are inspired by that too, to let their business be a ministry first and foremost.
There's something else that you pointed out. You talked about godly principles are lacking on both sides of the aisle, the left and the right.
Yeah.
So explain to me how you are trying to meet both of these, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, in the middle, with this principled approach to creating a coffee that will help people understand that they don't have to necessarily have an abortion. They can go on and work have the work done, or help rather, from a pregnancy care center.
Yeah, no, I think the life issue can be talked about from many aspects, from a spiritual side, but also a moral side and a sociological side. That life is just inherently a good thing. We believe that all humans are uniquely created in the image of God, and that everyone has something to offer. That everyone's created in this divine purpose. So I think that messaging can kind of bridge the gap a little bit of like just saying, hey, everyone is uniquely and wonderfully made, and they have an amazing purpose. Why would we snuff out any life that's out there? And so I hope we can bridge the gap in some sense, on both sides of the aisle. And obviously, as a Christian and as a conservative, I definitely want to make sure the life issue is first and foremost in the kind of the conservative values and in the Republic. That is such a core issue to so many voters out there. I care so deeply about it. I know millions of Americans care just as much as I do. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that these basic, what we think is a basic human right, which is the right to life, should be a foundational block. And it really should be a foundational block on both sides of the aisle, that everyone has the right to life.
Final question. What's your hope for America?
At least on this issue, my hope is that we can value and rally around the idea that life is special and that we can all cherish life. I think that would bring us together. Abortion rips families apart. I want to see families stay together. So my hope is that families are protected and the unborn has the right to life from conception in this country.
Anton Kresick, owner and creator of 7 Weeks Coffee. Thank you for joining us this hour. We appreciate you taking time out to talk to us on America's Hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And welcome back. My final word for tonight is that from both men, Pastor Bob as well as Jeff Wright, we have learned hopefully how to really count on this wonderful gift of hope that we have for America. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're going through, understand this. Keep spreading love, freedom, and peace, and let hope prevail. Until next time, good night, America.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your friendly conductor. All aboard the Love Train. All aboard the Love Train, the Love Train, the Love Train. If you don't feel the groove inside, give a
come on, all aboard.
Let me break it down for you like this.
The rhythm of love is easy to find if you're listening. The color of light isn't red, black, or white, but it's crimson. We all bleed the same. If you don't feel the groove, it's alright. Just give it time, give it time. Come on, y'all. Get on board. Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat inside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Yeah. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board.
Everyone's invited.
That means you
We're all united
and you and you.
on the love train.
Get on board.
All creeds and colors, all
Brothers
sisters and
and
brothers
sisters,
on the love train.
get on board the love train. Everyone's invited. We're all united on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, my sisters and brothers, get on board on the love train. Woo-hoo!
If you don't feel the
Hey.
groove inside, in the
Yeah.
time, the rhythm will find.
It's alright,
Love train,
just give it time.
love train, love train.
Keep on marching on, keep on being strong. Get on board the love train, love train. Let's spread some love, 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 love. Oh, on the love train, y'all. Hey, yeah. Get on board. All aboard. That was better. I'm happy now.
That was great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Wright. Oak Tree. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Oak Tree. Thank you. Every one of y'all. Every one of y'all. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
America and my America. United we stand, divided